everyone.
There we go.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kristen Hamilton, and I'm one of the clinical directors of the Wellness Collective, along with Liz Haggerty. We've partnered with Dee Gill at Dee Gill Counseling and Consulting to bring you this 4-part free webinar series. Unfortunately, Dee isn't able to be with us this evening, but sends her regards. She's not well tonight. Our students, Devin and Mackenzie, will be presenting the bulk of tonight's topic, which is self-compassion. I'm glad you guys are all here. I just want to cover a few business items before we take off so that we have all the best experience tonight. So for the best experience, I would switch to speaker view in the top right-hand corner of your Zoom screen. This will allow you just to see only the slides and then whoever's speaking. So whether it's Devin or Mackenzie or myself that's speaking, instead of seeing everyone's face on the screen, you'll just be focused on whoever's talking. Second, I want to let you know that tonight's event is being recorded, as there were quite a few people that weren't able to make it live. And third, we'll be doing a Q&A near the end of the presentation. So please feel free to write any questions in the chat. I'll be kind of monitoring it throughout, and then I'll be fielding them to Mackenzie and Devin to answer near the end. And then if you're able to and willing to keep your cameras on throughout the presentation, we would greatly appreciate it. Research shows that when we see other people engaged, we are able to engage more and get more out of the content. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Devin and Mackenzie to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about self-compassion.
Hi, everyone. I'm just going to pull my slides up here for you. There we go. It's always a little tricky with the technology. So my name is Devin. I am a student therapist that is supervised by Kristen at the Wellness Collective. I offer both online and in-person sessions in South Surrey is where we are located. I see both teens and adults, and I specialize in grief, mood disorders, depression, anxiety, substance use, and really just general life stress or life transitions, dissatisfaction with your life. And my primary focus is emotion focused and what's called accelerated experiential psychodynamic therapy, which is quite a mouthful, but they are both practices that focus a lot on our emotions in the body and how we feel them. And I'm a big believer in we've got to feel it to heal it. And so that is the model that I come from, and I am accepting clients right now. And I'm going to turn it over to Mackenzie just to say a little bit about herself.
Hi everyone, I'm Mackenzie, and I'm a student therapist as well, supervised by Dee, who unfortunately again could not be here tonight. But I take on clients, adults and teens, predominantly women, struggling with anxiety, depression, body image issues, and general life transitions. And I take more of an eclectic approach, just whatever's best suited for that client and what they're presenting with more of a psychodynamic approach integrated to that as well, which means kind of looking back onto childhood or where things stemmed from and kind of going from the root up. So yeah, that's a little about me.
Pardon me here. Okay.
So on your screen here, you should see the agenda for tonight. So we're going to start off with defining what self-compassion really is, digging into a little bit also of what it is not. And we're going to go into self-compassion and the critic, and followed by a little exercise. And then we're going to talk about self-compassion as a practice. So we're going to go through some different elements that comprise self-compassion, followed by another little exercise. And then we're going to talk about how self-compassion can establish a sense of safety within ourselves, followed by some Q&A. And again, if you do have any questions that come up throughout the webinar, feel free to just pop them into the chat box. I believe it's just at the bottom of your screen. And we'll try our best to get to that. I'm pretty sure we'll be able to get to those at the end. And yeah, for now, just sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Thanks, Mackenzie. So I would really like to start with just a general definition of self-compassion. We hear this word compassion a lot. I think that it's something that we talk about, having compassion for other people, but we take that word for granted and we don't always know what it really means. So when we're talking about self-compassion, it's not that much different from having compassion for other people. And there's a couple components to it. So the first one is acknowledging our suffering. And this might sound overly simplified. So I really want to branch it out. And what that means is, suffering sounds like a really strong word to me, and maybe not to other people, but I see that as sort of like an umbrella like word or vocabulary to describe either discomfort or something that's going on for us that's painful, that we don't really want to be a part of, but is going on for us anyway, and we don't really have a choice. So when we acknowledge it, what that means is to notice it. Oh, so like this might look like saying to myself, oh, I'm feeling a lot of pain right now, or oh, I'm feeling really sad. And the thing is, we don't often offer those sorts of sayings to ourselves. So they can feel really uncomfortable when we first start. And that's why, and we're going to talk about this more and more throughout, but that's why self-compassion is a practice. We are working our self-compassion muscle. It does not come easily to most folks. And it certainly isn't something that people perfect within a commitment of, I'm going to be self-compassionate. And then they're amazingly self-compassionate all the time. That's just not the nature of self-compassion. It's something that we practice and work like a muscle. So acknowledging our suffering is the first part of that, and saying, ooh, this is painful, or this is sad. I'm experiencing anger, and identifying it. Once we've identified it, we can respond to it. So when we respond to it, what that means is offering kindness and care to that feeling. So first we notice that it's going on, and then we go, wow, that is so hard because it is uncomfortable to feel sad, or it is lonely, or we don't like feeling anger because it makes us feel reactive. There's a lot of different ways, but the way we respond is through care. It's not through judgment. That is the difference here. So like if we were responding with like, why are you feeling like that? That's not what we're talking about when we're talking about self-compassion. We're talking about saying, that makes sense. It makes sense that you feel that way, or that must feel uncomfortable. And when we do that, we allow ourselves to acknowledge the human experience. I have yet to meet someone who doesn't know suffering. And that's because it's part of being human. We all experience suffering. And so one, we're acknowledging, hey, I'm a human being. I have feelings. I have challenging experiences in my life. And on top of that, we're acknowledging and can zoom out a little bit and go, I'm not the only one who's ever felt that. I'm not the only one who's ever felt lonely. I'm not the only one who's ever felt sad. And so when we acknowledge that human experience, again, it's coming from a place of care and tenderness rather than shaming or judgment. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we go through the presentation. But those are the three components to self-compassion. It's just like we would be communicating to a friend. Like if I have a friend who's upset, I'm not going to go, get over it. I'm going to go, wow, that's so hard. Or like, I'm really sorry. Do you need anything? And that's what we're doing, but we're directing it back to ourselves when we're in pain or when we're in suffering. So this is a quote by Kristin Neff, who is one of the leaders in self-compassion, and I feel it's really important here. So I'm going to read it to you. Self-compassion is a way of emotionally recharging our batteries. Rather than becoming drained by helping others, self-compassion allows us to fill up our internal reserves so that we have more to give to those who need us. So what is important about this quote for me is that it tells us why self-compassion is useful. Because I think for a lot of us, we've really gotten used to just like going and existing, maybe having judgments in our heads, but pushing through. And the thing is, what this is saying is that when we live in that place of self-criticism and self-judgment, we're actually depleting ourselves. We're taking away energy from not only ourselves and tiring ourselves out, but then we can't engage fully with the people that we care about and the people we want to be helping and giving to. And so that's really what the usefulness of self-compassion is that it's supportive and actually gives us energy. So just a quick example, when someone is like this is a very quick example. So I walk into a room and there's two people. One of them is like the most excited to see me. They're happy, they're smiling, they're warm. And the other person is, you know, kind of grouchy looking. They're maybe have like a scowl on their face and they seem a little judgy. I'm definitely going to go to the person who seems warm and who is happy to see me, because that feels much more welcoming and more energizing. I'm going to want to interact with that person. And for the other person who's a bit more scowly, I'm not really interested. And if I am interacting with them, I'm tired, I'm stressed, I'm uncomfortable. And so if you think of those two people as the dialogues in our mind, we can get really tired if we're only talking to the scowly person. And that's where self-compassion comes in.
I was on mute. So we're going to talk a bit about our critical voice and self-compassion. We all have a critical voice. We all have that annoying little naggy voice in our mind that is trying to compete with us having self-compassion. And everyone's voice might be saying different things. It might pop up at different times. So I kind of just invite you for a second here to think about, when does that critical voice, that negative, maybe it's nagging or it's saying nasty things to yourself, when does that really pop up for you? In what situations? And how does that feel? That's our critical voice. That's what is trying to compete with helping us, with having us develop this self-compassion. I kind of think of it as much as we like to think that we can multitask, and as much as we like to think that we can think of two things at the same time or more, it's pretty next to impossible. There's a select few people in the world that can really do that. What's really happening is you're thinking one thought, it goes, and then you're quickly thinking of the other one. You're filling with the other one. So I kind of imagine it as, here's my critical voice taking up space in my mind. Here's the critical voice. And there's only room for one thing in here. So it's the critical voice right now. And so having that self-compassion, developing that self-compassion, and once it's here, it budges that critical voice out of the way. So the self-compassion part, it's really taking over. So that's kind of how I like to visualize that critical voice and how it's really taking up that space. And it can be a lot harder to shove that critical voice down, and because it's going to pop right back up. It's a lot harder, and it's a lot easier, although it is still hard, it's a lot easier to nourish and help that self-compassion develop so it can budge the critical voice to the side. So I just kind of invite you to imagine like when that critical voice for you really shows itself in your life. And another thing is to, we're going to do a little exercise in a second here, but externalizing that critic. So externalizing that inner critic, that critical voice that we have inside. Externalizing means to literally take that critical voice and visualize it over here, maybe visualize it over here. And by doing so, it's helping to create that space. It's acknowledging that this critic is a part of me, but it is not who I am. It is not me. It's a part of me. And when I place that voice over here and I can visualize it, I can see what maybe I'm picturing what it looks like. Is it a person? Is it a Martian? What gender is it? When I'm picturing that inner critic over here on my shoulder, yapping away into my ear, I'm picturing it. It's separate from me, but it's still really a part of me, but I'm acknowledging that it's over here. It's not in me. It's not who I am. And that's just kind of creating that different perspective. It's helping create that space and gain a different perspective of what exactly it's saying. Is it telling you the truth, or is it just being nasty and mean and really not very helpful? Kristen actually gave us an example a couple of days ago of this soccer team analogy, and I love it because I grew up playing competitive soccer. So this speaks very true to me because I've actually had this situation happen. But basically, imagine one soccer team. Imagine you just had, or whatever sport you want to choose. Imagine you just had such a horrible game. Your team lost. You didn't play that great. Your team didn't do that well. You come off the field and your coach is screaming at you. Your coach is telling you all the things that you did wrong, how awful it is, saying, oh, well, I guess we'll like have to go even harder at practice because you guys just suck today and maybe we'll win, probably not because you have so much to work on. And then you leave and you go home, probably not feeling that great. And now imagine another soccer team. And this soccer team, you lost the game. It was the same kind of game. You didn't play that great. And this soccer team, you come off the field and the coach says, you know what, you guys, did you have fun? Maybe, maybe not. You did okay. Maybe we can work on these skills. We'll have fun next practice and try and harness these skills and we'll get really motivated and we'll do better next time. And you're going to leave feeling a little bit better and a little bit more motivated to do better the next game. So which team do you want to be on? Probably not the one with the mean coach that's, saying you didn't do great, maybe you'll do better. You're probably going to want to be on that fun team. I was actually in this situation in real life, and I left that mean team, the mean coach, to go on the fun team. And it was a way better experience. And my critical voice was a lot quieter. So just next time, just kind of take this with you and think, which team am I on right now? Which team do I want to be on? And just come back to this example or change it up however it fits you. And just come back to that and just think about that. Okay, so carrying on with the critical voice, we're going to do this just very small exercise. Remember how I stated how picturing that little inner critic over here, put him over there. Mine's name is the gremlin. So by naming him, every time he pops in, it's a him. Every time he pops into my mind, then I think, oh, that's just the gremlin. Like I know that's the gremlin. By placing him over here, I'm able to identify if this is reality, this is really truthful, I really did mess up or I really did horrible, or how can I change that? Maybe that's the gremlin talking. How can I take what he's saying and make it more helpful? So by naming that little critic, it helps to just put him over there and say, yes, I hear you, you're a part of me, I hear you, but I can control what you're saying and I can control how loudly you're saying it. So if you feel comfortable, I just kind of invite you to feel free to name your inner critic right now and jot it down in the chat box. And if you want to keep it to yourself, go ahead and keep it to yourself. I'll just give you a moment here to kind of think about what the name is. Hopefully it's no one's name that is attending today.
Mm-hmm.
I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, critic is good too. Mine's the gremlin. I also, while people are typing that out, I do also I want to acknowledge that the inner critic we do have, it does serve a purpose in some sense. The purpose is to, well, we think, is to help motivate us and to help us reach our goals. And that's sometimes what comes to mind if, oh, maybe I should listen to this inner critic, even though it's being mean. Maybe I should listen to it because it's like, it's motivating me to go to the gym, or it's motivating me to do that thing I've been putting off because it's saying these nasty things and it seems motivating. But really what it's doing is it might be motivating in the moment and it might be motivating for you to do that thing. But long term, it can be so harmful on our motivation and our self-esteem and our confidence, and can prevent us from further going on with our longer term goals, not just going to the gym for one time. It dampens our success down the line because it makes it that much harder. think of that coach again. If the coach is nonstop every single game, ragging on you, ragging on your team, it's going to be that much harder and it's going to weigh that much heavier on you. Sure, it might be motivating the first time, the second time, but after that, it's going to be that much harder to bounce back. So yes, it serves a purpose to a point, because then it gets harmful. And I think for a lot of us, it's reached the point where it's now harmful.
Thanks, Mackenzie. We'll move on here. So one of the things with self-compassion is that there are 3 elements in terms of assessing and even just framing it in our minds that can be really helpful and actually simplify the concept. So as we go through these, I'm going to encourage you to gauge on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being I can definitely work on this more, and 5 being I think I do this really well. You're not going to need to share this. This is just for your own information and check-in. And as we go through them, you'll see a little bit more what I'm talking about. But I do want to also say this before I get started, that what we would score today is almost certainly going to be different than what we would score ourselves tomorrow. So every day is a little bit different. And that's just because of so many different factors, like what our mood is like, our energy level, what's gone on that day for us. And with time, we can kind of continue to check in and build awareness of places that we're doing really solid and other places where maybe we need to put a little bit more intention or attention. So the first element of self-compassion here is self-kindness in contrast with self-judgment. So what self-kindness is very much receiving our experience in a warm and caring way. So we're patient, we're non-judgmental, we're acknowledging or noticing, ooh, I'm feeling really sad today, or I'm feeling really angry or anxious, or that situation at work was really uncomfortable. And noticing it in a way that is warm, that is supportive, that is very much in some ways kind of neutral to warm, but without judgment. So the self-judgment component of this would be when I have a challenging interaction, like I make a mistake at work. Self-judgment looks like, why did you make that mistake? That was so stupid. That was so stupid. Why didn't you think that through and be more on top of things? Self-kindness goes, okay, you made a mistake and you're not perfect, and maybe you can do better next time. And that's the difference between the two. So if you're rating yourself on that 1 to 5 scale, 1 would look like that first example I just gave. And 5 would be, I'm giving myself a lot of generosity. I am kind and warm and noticing without judgment and like some encouragement even. The second element here is common humanity in contrast to isolation. So we talked a little bit about this at the beginning, where we're talking about acknowledging that suffering and discomfort is just part of being human. And it also means that we're not the only ones who've felt these emotions. So when I make a mistake at work, going, I am one of probably everybody who's ever had a job who's made a mistake at work and knows how uncomfortable it is and knows how nerve-wracking and scary and sometimes frustrating making a mistake at work can be. Where isolation goes, nobody could possibly understand what I've just been through here. Nobody has a clue what it's like to make this kind of mistake at their job. And when we go to that place of isolation, what can happen is that we then aren't going to share what's gone on for us because we don't think people are going to get it. So we are isolating in our own thoughts and also not reaching out to supports, right? So there's both a lack of self-compassion because we're thinking that we're like really outside of the norm and unusual. And we then act in that way of isolating further. So with this scale, 1 would be this deeply isolating, nobody understands me dialogue versus common humanity, where it's, I'm one of many people who knows this feeling and it's really uncomfortable, but I know I'm not the only one. And there are people out there who get it. And that would be 5 on the scale. I don't know if I said that. So when we move to mindfulness as the third element here, mindfulness is noticing without judgment, which you might notice a theme because I've mentioned that a fair bit so far. It's a noticing of, oh, you're uncomfortable with the mistake you made today, or you're really worried about that mistake. And you'll notice there's no judgment there. It's a reflection of what's an experience that's happening. They're not saying it's good that you're nervous about this. And we're also not saying it's bad. It just is the experience. Over identification looks different. It looks like you basically are that mistake or you are that discomfort. So like you're just a person who makes mistakes all the time. That's just who you are. You don't ever pay attention. Or you can even take it a step further and go, I'm a mistake, or I'm really anxious. I'm an anxious person all the time. I become that experience. I can't see myself except for that experience. It's kind of like tunnel vision. And when we do that, we can't look upon it with compassion because we are that thing, right? So here the scoring would go 1 for over identification, being like really high, and I have a really hard time seeing myself as anything but my inner experience. And 5 being I'm able to notice, oof, I'm feeling really uncomfortable right now, and less judgment and more just noticing. And this, again, firstly, is a practice and also changes every day. So some days I might be super good at self-kindness. I am like slaying that game. I'm doing so good. But my common humanity, it's a struggle. Sometimes it's really hard for me to remember that other people know what it's like to feel certain feelings that I feel. And other days it might flip. So this is why it's valuable to know these elements too, just to gauge, and it can change day to day. And that way, and then you can notice themes as well if you continue to do the check-in. But that's so that I want to normalize that there are very few people who are hitting 5 on all 3 of these every day, and certainly not when they are just starting self-compassion practice. It's a practice.
Just to kind of echo also what Devin has been saying, is to be self-compassionate when it comes to self-compassion. Be self-compassionate with yourself on your self-compassion journey. It takes daily practice, it takes daily work, and often the most work, the hardest part of it all is when you need it the most. When you're in a situation where that inner critic is just yapping away, is when that work that little small work that you've been doing every day that seems small, that's when it really comes out and shines the way and knocks that inner critic away. So please just be self-compassionate with the development of your self-compassion and your journey. It's always going to change. It's always going to differ. Just like I would say, just like learning a language, you really are learning a new language because you're learning a new dialogue with yourself. You've been telling yourself the same dialogue since who knows whenever this inner critic has kind of birthed inside of you. Whenever it's kind of shown itself, whenever it maybe in your childhood or whenever it kind of became. So yeah, just take your time, be patient with yourself. You're really just learning a new language and you're learning a new dialogue with yourself. But there are some ways here on the screen that can kind of help speed it along a little bit, some ways to help cultivate that self-compassion. So the first one we kind of touched on, which is mindfulness and meditation, kind of similar to what I was saying before about really only having space for one thought in a second, one thought in your brain. So when that inner critic is talking, what mindfulness does is breaks open that space, and that inner critic, if you imagine those thoughts or whatever it's saying to you, like clouds just floating by you, that's how I like to imagine it. Just not being non-judgmental of what it's saying, acknowledging, I hear you. I'm not ignoring you. I hear you. I see you, but you are not taking over me. So that's really about what mindfulness and meditation practices are about. And that takes time, and that's everyone's own journey. I would say start with trying to do 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes in the evening, and there you go. You have 10 minutes that you've practiced mindfulness and meditation, and soon enough you'll just start doing it without setting a timer. You'll just innately start doing it and becoming more mindful overall, and slowly quieting that inner critic and letting that self-compassion bloom and develop. Another thing is seeing yourself as a friend. So, like we had mentioned, you probably wouldn't say something nasty and mean to your friend about, oh, yeah, like you said you were going to go for that run and like you didn't. Like, you probably should, because I've been noticing like you're gaining weight, you should go for that run. You probably wouldn't say that to your friend. I hope you wouldn't say that to your friend, or your friend would say that to you. So, why are we saying it to ourselves? So, instead, maybe that friend, or maybe you would say to yourself, hey, like I had a really overwhelming day. Today was a lot and my body is so tired. Instead of beating myself up about going for the run, I just maybe needed that day for my body. Maybe my body needed rest today. And just really being that's self-compassion. That in itself is a self-compassion act as self-compassion practice. So just seeing yourself as a friend. And also, I kind of like to look at it as I kind of see myself as a younger me. So I see little Mackenzie over there. And we all have a little us inside all of us, because we were once just a little person, a little child, and now that person's still inside us somewhere. So seeing yourself as that, just picturing yourself as younger you, that's inside of you still. She's in your heart, he or she. You probably wouldn't be beating that person up. You'd probably be wanting to help them flourish, and you'd want them to develop self-compassion. You'd want to speak kindly to them. If you have a little sister too, you can picture that. I don't. So I picture a little Mackenzie, and I'm not going to say mean things to her. And I remember that little person, that younger you, is still inside of you. They're still there. So speaking kindly to yourself is speaking kindly to them, helping them flourish, helping them cultivate that self-compassion. Another thing is journaling. I'm sure we all have heard of journaling. Maybe you are into journaling yourself. And letter writing, I really like the idea of love letter writing to yourself, writing yourself a love letter. So this could be writing kind things about yourself, again, cultivating that self-compassion and working out just like a muscle, just writing all these nice things about yourself. But on the flip side of that is just journal or just free writing. If you are writing whatever the inner critic is saying to you and you're writing that down, again, same with naming that inner critic and placing it over there. We're creating that space, we're creating that distance, and we can see what it's saying. We are creating that new perspective and creating that space between who I am, who I want to be, and what that inner critic is saying. And we might read it over and be like, oh gosh, that's harsh. Or that's not really true. Why was it saying that? And you can throw it out, close it, throw that piece of paper away, or you can read it over, whatever's more beneficial to you. That's up to you. But again, just the practice of that is regaining that perspective. And again, gaining that distance between the inner critic so the self-compassion could rise up and butt that inner critic to the side.
Thank you. So what we're going to do now is a little self-compassion break. So Mackenzie just gave us a couple practices that we can do, and one of them is a mindfulness or meditation practice, and that's what we're going to do now. So I'm going to invite you, if you feel more comfortable, to turn your camera off for this. You do not have to, but just some folks are more comfortable with that for mindfulness. And this is about a 5-minute, get comfortable in your seat. And give me 1 second to pull this up. And here we go, everyone.
This practice is called the self-compassion break. And it's something you can do anytime during the day or at night when you need a little self-compassion. So to practice this exercise, we actually need to call up a little suffering. So I'd invite you to think about a situation in your life right now that is difficult for you. Maybe you're feeling stress, or you're having a relationship problem, or you're worried about something that might happen. I'd invite you to think of something that is difficult, but not overwhelmingly difficult, especially if you're new to practicing the self compassion break. So, finding a situation and getting in touch with it. What's going on? What happened? Or what might happen? Who said what? Really bring the situation to life in your mind's eye. And then I'm going to be saying a series of phrases that are designed to help us remember the three components of self-compassion when we need it most. So the first phrase is, this is a moment of suffering, right? We're bringing mindful awareness to the fact that suffering is present. And I'd invite you to find some language that speaks to you. Something like, this is really hard right now. Or, I'm really struggling. We're actually turning toward our difficulty, acknowledging it, naming it. This is a moment of suffering. The second phrase is, suffering is a part of life. Okay, we're reminding ourselves of our common humanity. Suffering is a part of life. And again, finding language that speaks to you. It may be something like, it's not abnormal to feel this way. Many people are going through similar situations. Right? The degree of suffering may be different, the flavor of suffering may be different, but suffering is a part of life, part of being human. And then the third phrase is, may I be kind to myself in this moment. And to support bringing kindness to yourself, I'd invite you to perhaps put your hands over your heart or some other place on your body that feels soothing and comforting. Feeling the warmth of your hands, the gentle touch, letting those feelings of care stream through your fingers. May I be kind to myself. And using any language that supports that sense of kindness. Perhaps language you would use with a good friend you cared about who was going through a very similar situation. You know, it may be something like, I'm here for you. It's going to be okay. I care about you. You can even try using a diminutive if that feels comfortable. You know, oh, darling, I'm so sorry. Or you can try calling yourself by your first name. Anything that feels natural to express your deep wish that you be well and happy and free from suffering. And then letting go of the practice and Noticing how your body feels right now. Allowing any sensations to be just as they are. Allowing yourself to be just as you are in this moment.
Okay. So I would like to invite anybody who feels comfortable to share a word or a phrase of how they felt either during or right now after that exercise. Soft, yeah. Mindful, beautiful. Yeah. I also want to say it can at times feel a little bit uncomfortable. If it's something new for us, it can actually at times bring up a little bit of anxiety because we're holding space for feelings that maybe we haven't held space for before. And sometimes they'll get a little bit bigger when we give them space. These are so beautiful. Loved and tired, heavy, melting, calm, relieving. Yeah. All of those make so much sense to me. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for sharing that. I was thinking, oh, yeah, that makes so much sense that it does sometimes feel sad when we realize we haven't been giving that love to ourselves. That there can sometimes be like just a tinge of grief to it, like, oh, wow, I deserve that love too. So that makes so much sense to me. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you, everybody. All right. I want to talk a little bit about establishing safety through self-compassion. So I want you to take a moment to think about a person or a place or an item that helps you to feel safe. And you may notice that one of the qualities this person likely has, or item or space, is that you don't feel judged. You don't feel the need to protect yourself with this person. You can bring all of who you are, no matter where you're at, to this person, to this space with this item. We feel supported, maybe held. And maybe there's some people might feel like more expansive or soft. A lot of the things that words people were saying from the practice. So this is so wonderful. And I use this as an example because we know what safety feels like externally. I know when I feel safe in a room. However, our minds are another place where we can cultivate safety. And that's called inner safety, safety within ourselves. So self-compassion allows us to feel safer. I'm going to feel safer. Like I gave that example earlier. If I go into a room and there's a person who's really happy to see me feels warm and inviting versus a person who's scowling and seems displeased with my presence, I'm going to feel a heck of a lot less safe with that scowling person than I am going to with the warm, kind, nurturing person. So if we think about our minds and think about how safe do I feel with my inner critic? I don't feel super safe because I feel judged. I feel like I have to protect myself. I will have my armor on to pretend like everything's totally fine. Where if we go with our self-compassionate inner dialogue, that feels a lot safer. And when we do that, we can feel safer, not only to acknowledge what we're actually feeling without judgment, but also to hold ourselves accountable. So I'm going to give an example of making a mistake at work. If I make a mistake at work and I go, you are such a dummy, why would you do that? I'm going to then be like, oh, it wasn't that big of a deal. It was probably not that important, or I'm going to get angry or shameful, but I'm certainly going to not talk to as many people about it, probably try to shut down the dialogue internally, and probably feel really tired and depleted. Excuse me. Where with a self-compassionate dialogue of, okay, you're really uncomfortable about that mistake, and I think you could probably do a little bit better next time. I'm then able to actually reflect on what I could do to improve. And I maybe will look for support with a colleague or a boss to fix the situation, because I know that no matter what their reaction is, I'm not feeling ashamed because I've done the work to quiet my critic. So that's what inner safety looks like. And what they've actually found is that when we use self-compassion, not only is there a difference in our inner dialogue in our minds, but there's actually a biological difference. So they've done studies on two groups of people. One group was prompted to use self-compassionate thinking and like quotes and things like that. The other group did not receive any of that. Everything else was the same. And when they looked at their cortisol levels, and cortisol is a stress hormone that indicates we're stressed or overwhelmed, the folks who had been prompted with self-compassionate dialogue had significantly less cortisol in their system than the folks who did not get that prompting. So what that tells us is that our body reacts to our mind and what we're thinking in our brain. And so when we are in that place of criticism and judgment, our stress levels rise. We feel more overwhelmed. We feel less safe in our bodies, where when we practice self-compassion, not only do we feel safer mentally, but our bodies physically feel safer. Which really brings me to this quote from, again, Kristin Neff, that says, remember that if you really want to motivate yourself, love is more powerful than fear. And if you think about it, in these places, our critic often comes from fear, fear of being rejected, fear of not being enough, fear of being imperfect. And that's not motivating. It makes us want to stop trying. And love is supportive. It makes us feel capable and strong and safe too. And so that's why I really love this quote. So we're going to open it up to questions now. I want to thank you all for your time today and your openness to the exercises. Please feel free to type your questions into the chat, or if you want to just, we'll try just unmuting. And if people are talking over, then I'll just say, okay, we'll do the hands instead, but I think we'll be okay. Yeah, I think we're ready for you.
Awesome. I don't see any questions so far in the chat, so feel free to type them now or raise your hand and unmute yourself. So Bryn Ross has a question. Would self-compassion help with compassion fatigue?
It's a really, really good question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say it absolutely would, because a lot of the time with compassion fatigue, we're often leaving our helping jobs and then holding them close, right? And having a hard time being compassionate with ourselves, because like, to me, they're very related to burnout and this idea of being perfect, perfect in our profession. And so when we offer that self-compassion, there's a gentleness. And also if we're in compassion fatigue, turning self-compassion, being like, oh, it makes so much sense that you're tired of caring for other people. That makes so much sense because it's so much energy. Mm-hmm. And we kind of talked about at the beginning that self-compassion allows us to help other people. So I would say short answer, yes, but then I talked more.
Thank you. Ainsley has asked, do you recommend any guided meditations, apps, sites, YouTube, etc., for those of us just starting out? I would recommend Kristin Neff's website, which is selfcompassion.org. That's probably the best place to start out, because she has a whole page full of like narrative exercises as well as guided ones that I've gotten a lot out of, that my clients have gotten tons out of as well. And then the Calm app, I think a lot of people get a lot out of the Calm app.
Yeah, if I might add to that, if you don't mind, Kristin.
Yeah.
Also Tara Brach. I'm going to type that into the chat just so that you can get the spelling right. but she does a lot of self-compassion, and they're on YouTube if you are more inclined to YouTube over Calm or Insight app. That's another one.
Sonam also recommended Waking Up app by Sam Harris.
Beautiful.
I haven't heard of that one. I'll
I
check
haven't
that out.
either.
Okay, I'll go. I also have a question. I was just wondering, and thank you guys so much for your presentation and taking the time. It was really interesting and gentle and supportive and engaging. It was just good. So thank you. I'm kind of curious about self-compassion and finding that line. Sometimes the more I practice it, I get like, okay, for example, if I need to chill for a bit and then I watch TikToks or Netflix just to stop working and being of service, like just to turn off, and then it can cross a line of like, I'm just like disassociating into this or whatever. And that dialogue that happens. So do you have any experience or practice with like that line and how you talk to yourself through that, navigating that?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know who was speaking because I can't see.
Kelly.
Kelly. Okay. Kelly, I can relate. It's I think a lot of the times when we start that scrolling or we go into TikTok or whatever to really kind of decompress throughout the day, what it really is we're telling ourselves that we're decompressing from the day and it feels like it in the moment. And then what you're explaining afterwards, you don't feel so great afterwards. And I think what's really happening here is a lot of the times it's distracting ourselves from sitting with the discomfort that we might have experienced during the day or just experiencing that. And so as easy as it is to grab that phone and to scroll or to do whatever, because like, oh my gosh, I'm so guilty of this. And it's something I'm trying to be self-compassionate with myself about. But really what it's doing is it's not really decompressing the way we think it is. It's really just distracting ourselves from feeling that discomfort. And in order to feel compassionate with ourselves and truly decompress, we got to give ourselves some time to sit with the uncomfortableness, which is a lot harder, tends to be a lot harder. But it does get easier. And I don't know if that answers your question, but I think it's something that takes time. And I think it's something that also within therapy as well as within one-on-one sessions, it can be, we can dive, like someone can dive into that a little bit more and you can kind of see where that's coming from and see different coping strategies and what works for you and what doesn't. So yeah, I don't know how to make that a short answer, but
yeah, I think it's also a checking in with yourself around the motivation. Am I scrolling through TikTok to numb out or distract myself, or am I scrolling through TikTok to just take a couple minutes break? And just kind of really checking in with yourself of what is the motivation here? When do I need to move on to something that's more nourishing to me? Is this nourishing and life-giving to me, or is this depleting me and making me feel worse about myself? Because I've seen this stuff on TikTok and like not all of it's life-giving. Yeah, that's what I would say. Does that kind of answer your question, Kelly?
That's awesome, you guys. And it makes sense. It landed and it doesn't always feel like the compassionate exercise. So I think that's clear, just like checking in with that. And cool. Thank you. Thank you.
Totally. Shariah has a question. Any recommendations for ways to encourage practicing self-compassion for new moms? Ways to be okay with not having too high of expectations for yourself when entering motherhood. I'm sure a lot of moms struggle with mom guilt.
Oh yeah, that's a big one.
Boy. Yeah.
I think a really big piece here, like self-compassion, is so valuable for new moms because it's just overwhelming, the amount of expectations on you. It's hard enough as one person to manage expectations on yourself, let alone when you have little ones at home. So sometimes, and also you don't have as much time. You're very, very busy. And so I think a big thing for me in that regard is truly doing the mental check-in, because you maybe are not going to be able to sit on your own privately through like even a 5-minute guided meditation. That may not be feasible. And that's where self-compassion comes in too, is that's a reasonable expectation of saying, I don't get 5 minutes to myself right now as a new mom, or as a mom in general, depending. And so right now what I need is just the inner dialogue of seeing myself as a friend. Maybe that's your example or your practice, or talking to yourself as a friend. So Mackenzie shared, like, she'll talk to herself like she has little Mackenzie there, and she's talking to herself like when she's young. I do a very similar practice where I'll kind of imagine, and I got this from yoga with Adrienne, where she'll sometimes say, like, imagine you're looking into a pond and you see your reflection looking back at you. And there's something about that that's very heartwarming to me. And so I'll imagine having a dialogue with myself, being like, you're doing so good and you're trying so hard. And just validating that being a mom takes a lot of energy, and that there is no such thing as a perfect parent. So normalizing that. I hope that answers your question. I also noticed, I think we skipped Heather's question there, Kristen.
So are there benefits to the critic? Why do you think it exists, and how do you manage it?
That's a good question.
Mhm.
I do think there are benefits to the critic. But I think we abuse it. I think it kind of gets the best of us. And I think I mentioned a little bit before, I think the benefits to the critic are to help motivate us, to help us reach our goals, and to get us out of bed, to get us to work the job that maybe we don't want to, or get us to go for that run. And it tells us those things. But again, long term, those have a very negative effect on our self-esteem, on our confidence, which then it's a domino effect, which is going to affect other areas and leak its way into other areas of our life. So yes, there's benefits to it to a certain point. There's benefits until it becomes unhelpful and really not productive long term. And you said, why do you think it exists and how do you manage it? I think the reason why it exists, I think, is different for everyone. I think it's a little bit of tug and pull from your ego and also your more conscious self. And I think a lot of it does stem from, I think a lot of it stems from childhood, maybe the way parents or a coach or a teacher or somebody else spoke to you, and you learned that's okay, and that's how you need to speak to yourself in order to get things done, or whatever it means for you. And I mean, managing it is definitely the difficult part, but it's something that it's a part of you. It's not going anywhere, but it can be a little more quiet, and it can be more beneficial when we cultivate that self-compassion throughout the components that we had mentioned today, as well as, I think, doing further inner work with your own therapy sessions, or whatever works for you. I think that through that, there's homework and there's more techniques that are more suitable for you specifically to help manage that. So that one's a little bit tricky for me to answer, but yeah, I hope that helps a little bit.
Okay, I think we've got not any more time for questions. We want to end with a really great activity. We're just going to go quickly through the references list, Devin. Okay, the resources list. So most of this is Kristin Neff, because she is really the genius of self-compassion. So there's a great TED Talk on the space between self-esteem and self-compassion that you can just find on YouTube. And then there's podcast galore. If you just go on the podcast app on the Apple app, you'll just search Kristin Neff and you'll find tons of it. And then her biggest book is The Proven Power of Being Kind to Yourself, Self-Compassion, and Fearsome Self-Compassion. She also has a workbook with Chris Germer, who's kind of came in as like her partner in self-compassion later on. So that's a really good workbook as well.
Sorry, there we go.
It's okay. And all of the references that I think Devin and Mackenzie got from for this presentation all came from Kristen Neff's website, so selfcompassion.org. And then we're going to share one last activity that I want us to turn off our cameras and just put our hands over our heart and just kind of sit with and enjoy. Hillary McBride gave us permission to use this recording. She's a local psychologist, writer, researcher, has a podcast called Other People's Problems. Highly recommend it. So let's have a little listen to that. Thank you, everyone.
Here are some things that are true. You are good. You have always been good. Right from the beginning. And I'm sorry if anyone told you otherwise. This breath, these hands, those feet, that smile, those ears, that heart, this heart, this beating heart, this breath, this breath, this breath. It's good. It's all good. So, so, so good. You are loved. You are so loved. You are lovable. You have been working so hard. I don't have to know how to know that it's true. You are precious. You are not a mistake. You are very on purpose. You are not broken. You never were. I'm sorry that you might have thought that. I'm sorry anyone made you think that. That wasn't about you. But you are enough. You are totally enough. You don't have to earn your enoughness. You don't have to grovel for value, for love, for goodness. You already have it. You already are it. You are loved. You are loved. And you are good. So, so good.
Thank you, everyone, for your time today. And please feel free to email us if you have any other questions. And we will do our best to, or if you want more resources, we're happy to help.
Yeah.
Mhm. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Awesome.
Bye.
Have a good evening.